The check was for $5 million, and it was meant to buy my divorce. I stared at the crisp paper sliding across the mahogany table, my father-in-law's manicured fingers still resting on one corner. The dining room felt suffocating suddenly, all crystal chandeliers and oil paintings worth more than most people's houses. Robert Harrington's cold gray eyes watched me like a hawk sizing up prey. "What exactly is this?" I asked, though I knew damn well what it was. "Your exit strategy, son." Robert's voice carried the kind of authority that came from decades of making billion-dollar decisions. $5 million to walk away from my daughter, clean break, no lawyers, no mess. I could hear Isabella and her mother Catherine chatting in the adjacent parlor, their voices a distant murmur through the heavy oak doors. My wife had no idea her father was trying to buy me off like some gold-digging gigolo. "You want to pay me to divorce Isabella?" The words felt surreal coming out of my mouth. "I want to pay you to be realistic." Robert leaned back in his leather chair, swirling his brandy. "You seem like a decent enough fellow, Alex. But let's be honest about what this is. You make what, $60,000 a year as an accountant? Isabella's trust fund generates more than that in interest every month." The condescension in his voice was thick enough to cut with a knife. This whole evening had been a test, and I was apparently failing spectacularly. From the moment Isabella had whispered, "Just be yourself," as we walked up the stone steps of the Harrington estate, I'd known this dinner would be an evaluation. The handshake at the door had been Robert's first assessment, firm, measuring, finding me wanting. Catherine's barely concealed disdain when Isabella introduced me as her husband had been the second. The interrogation over dinner about my job, my background, my prospects had been the third. "Dad, stop it!" Isabella's voice carried from the other room, though she was talking to her mother about something else entirely. "She deserves someone who can provide for her properly," Robert continued. "Someone from her world. You understand?" I understood perfectly. I understood that Robert Harrington saw me as a temporary inconvenience in his daughter's life. I understood that Catherine had spent the entire evening looking at me like I'd tracked mud on her Persian rugs. I understood that they'd invited me here not to welcome me into the family, but to figure out how much it would cost to get rid of me. What they didn't understand was who they were really dealing with. $5 million is a lot of money, I said slowly, picking up the check. Robert's face brightened. "It is indeed. More than you'd make in a lifetime at your current salary. You could start fresh, find someone more suitable to your circumstances." I studied the check, noting the perfect penmanship, the Harrington family crest watermarked into the paper. Robert had probably written it before I'd even arrived, that confident he could solve the problem of his daughter's inappropriate marriage with enough zeros. "You know what's funny?" I set the check down carefully. "Isabella and I met at a coffee shop downtown. Nothing fancy, just a little place called Grind. She was there with her laptop working on some presentation, and she looked so frustrated I bought her a refill and asked if she was okay." Robert's expression didn't change, but I could see impatience flickering in his eyes. "She told me later she fell for me because I didn't know who she was, didn't care about her last name or her family's money. Just saw her as Isabella, this brilliant, funny woman who happened to be having a bad day." "Very romantic," Robert said dryly, "but romance doesn't pay for the lifestyle she's accustomed to." "Actually," I pulled out my phone, "it does." I opened my investment app and turned the screen toward him. Robert squinted at the display, his face going through a series of expressions as he processed what he was seeing. "What is this?" His voice had lost its commanding tone. "My portfolio." The numbers were clear enough. Total value, $10.2 billion, the majority held in shares of Harrington Industries, purchased through a complex web of shell companies and offshore trusts that had taken me years to construct. Robert's hands were shaking as he reached for the phone. "This can't be real." "It's very real," I'm the anonymous investor your board has been trying to identify for the past 3 years, the one who owns 43% of your company. The brandy glass slipped from Robert's other hand, crystal shattering against the hardwood floor. The sound brought Catherine hurrying in from the parlor. What happened? Robert, are you all right? Isabella appeared behind her mother, concern creasing her beautiful face. Is everything okay? Robert was staring at my phone like it might bite him. Catherine, he's the anonymous investor. What anonymous investor? Catherine looked between us, confusion evident. The one who owns controlling interest in my company, Robert whispered. The silence that followed was deafening. Isabella's mouth fell open, her eyes darting from the phone to my face and back again. Alex? Her voice was barely audible. Is this real? I nodded, taking her hand. Very real. But you live in that little apartment. You drive a 10-year-old Honda. You shop at Target. Because I choose to. Money doesn't have to define how you live. Catherine had gone pale. Oh God, we made such a mistake. You tried to bribe me, I said quietly, standing up. You offered me $5 million to leave your daughter because you thought I wasn't good enough for her. Because you judged me by my salary and my clothes and decided I was some kind of fortune hunter. We didn't know, Robert stammered. If we had known, you would have treated me differently, which is exactly why I never told anyone, including Isabella. I looked at my wife, whose eyes were still wide with shock. I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I'm worth. Isabella was crying now, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry they did this to you. It's not your fault. I wiped away her tears with my thumb. But I think we're done here. As we walked toward the door, Robert called after us. Alex, wait, please. Let's discuss this like civilized people. I turned back one last time. Mr. Harrington, you had your chance to treat me like a civilized person. Instead, you tried to buy me off like some two-bit con artist. I won't forget that. In the car, Isabella sobbed against my shoulder. Why didn't you tell me? All this time I thought. You thought what? I thought you were struggling. I felt guilty sometimes about my trust fund, about having so much when you worked so hard for so little. I started the engine, watching the Harrington mansion shrink in the rearview mirror. I worked hard because I wanted to. The money was never the point. What was the point? Proving that I could build something from nothing, that I could take the $20,000 I had when I graduated college and turn it into something that mattered. Isabella was quiet for a long moment. 43% of Harrington Industries. That means you could fire your father, dissolve the board, sell the company? I glanced at her. The thought had crossed my mind. Will you? I considered the question as we drove through the tree-lined streets of her parents' exclusive neighborhood, past the gated estates and manicured lawns, past the country club where Robert probably bragged about his business acumen to his golf buddies, past the world that had just tried to reject me. I don't know yet, I said finally. But I'll tell you one thing. Your father's going to learn what it feels like to work for someone he underestimated. The phone started ringing at 7 a.m. the next morning. Robert's name flashed on the screen, and I let it go to voicemail. Then again at 7:15 and 7:30. By 8 o'clock, he'd called 6 times. Isabella was in the shower, and I could hear her humming, something she only did when she was processing big emotions. Last night had been a lot to absorb. Hell, it had been a lot for me too, and I'd been living with the secret for years. I finally answered on the 7th call. Alex, thank God. Robert's voice was strained, desperate. We need to talk. I thought we said everything we needed to say last night. Please, I was wrong, terribly wrong. Let me make this right. I poured myself coffee, taking my time. How exactly do you plan to make it right, Robert? Lunch today, the club, We can discuss your role in the company, your vision for... My role, I laughed. Robert, I don't have a role in your company. I own your company. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. Finally, he spoke, his voice much smaller than before. What do you want from me? Right now, nothing. I'm going to take some time to think about what 43% ownership really means. The board meeting is Thursday. If you're planning any changes, I'll let you know. I hung up before he could respond. Isabella emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel, her dark hair dripping. Was that my father? 7th call this morning. She sat on the edge of the bed, studying my face. You're enjoying this? A little, I admitted. Is that terrible? After what he did? After what they both did? She shook her head. I think you're entitled to enjoy it a lot. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. Alex, I'm mortified by our behavior last night. Please give us a chance to apologize properly. Then another from Robert. Name your price for a private meeting. Isabella read over my shoulder and snorted. He's still trying to buy you off. He just doesn't know the price anymore. The funny thing is, there was a time when 5 million would have seemed like all the money in the world to me. When was that? I thought back to those early days, fresh out of college with a finance degree and more ambition than sense. When I was 22 and living in a studio apartment that was smaller than your parents' wine cellar, I had this crazy idea that I could beat the market if I just worked hard enough and stayed smart enough. What was your first big win? Tech startup called Cloud Vault. I put every penny I had into it when they were trading at $12 a share, sold at $240. Isabella's eyes widened. That's a 20-fold return. 20 times 20,000 is 400,000. That's when I knew I wasn't just lucky. I was good at this. I sat beside her on the bed. But the real breakthrough came when I started using shell companies to hide my identity. Turns out, when people don't know who's buying, they make different decisions, including my father. Especially your father. Harrington Industries was hemorrhaging money when I first invested. Bad acquisitions, worse management, a board more interested in golf than growth. I started buying shares through different entities, never enough to trigger disclosure requirements. And then? Then I started making suggestions, anonymous letters to the board, detailed analyses of underperforming divisions, strategic recommendations that always seemed to work out. Your father thought he was having the best run of his career. Isabella was quiet for a moment. He was actually following your advice. For 3 years, every major decision that saved his company came from me. My phone rang again. This time it was Monica Westfield, Isabella's best friend and the biggest gossip in their social circle. Don't answer it, Isabella said quickly. Why not? Because my mother probably called her this morning, and Monica will want all the details so she can spread them around the country club by lunch. I answered anyway. Hello, Monica. Alex. Oh my God, Isabella's mother just told me the most incredible story. Please tell me it's true that you're secretly some kind of billionaire investor. Isabella buried her face in her hands. It's true, I said simply. I knew it. Monica's voice was practically vibrating with excitement. I always said there was something mysterious about you. The way you never seemed worried about money, how you always knew exactly what stocks to avoid. Remember when you told me to dump my Enron shares? I remember. You saved me $200,000. And when you said that tech IPO was overvalued, Monica. Isabella took the phone from me. Can we talk about this later? It's been a very overwhelming 24 hours. Of course. But Isabella, do you realize what this means? Your husband could buy and sell half the people at the club, including that awful Patricia Thornton, who's always bragging about her husband's hedge fund. After Isabella hung up, I could see the wheels turning in her head. This is going to change everything, isn't it? It doesn't have to change anything between us. But it will change everything else. The way people treat us, the way they treat you, my parents, our friends, even strangers once this gets out. She was right, of course. The secret I'd guarded so carefully was out now, at least within her family, and knowing Catherine and Monica, it wouldn't stay contained for long. "Are you okay with that?" I asked. Isabella considered the question seriously. "I'm okay with people knowing my husband is brilliant and successful. I'm not okay with people treating you differently because of your bank account." "Some will." "Then they're not really our friends, are they?" My phone buzzed again. This time it was Derek Chen, the IT guy at Isabella's advertising agency. We'd never spoken directly, but I knew he had a crush on my wife that he thought was subtle. His text was simple. "Heard some interesting news about you this morning." I showed Isabella the message. How would Derek know anything? Monica works in the same building. She probably couldn't wait to tell everyone. Isabella sighed. By tonight, everyone we know will have heard some version of this story. Probably an exaggerated version. Knowing Monica, she'll have you worth $50 billion by dinner time. I was about to respond when my phone rang again. This time the caller ID made me pause. Chase Langford, VP at Isabella's agency, and a guy I'd never liked. Too slick, too eager, too interested in impressing people with his BMW and his expensive suits. "This should be interesting," I muttered, answering the call. "Alex, buddy!" Chase's voice had a fake enthusiasm that made my skin crawl. "I just heard the most amazing news about you. We should grab drinks tonight, talk about some investment opportunities I've been working on." "Investment opportunities?" "High-yield stuff, very exclusive. I've been looking for the right partner, someone with serious capital and vision." Isabella was making gagging motions beside me. "Thanks, but I'm not looking for new investments right now." "Come on, man. We're practically family, working at the same agency and all. I could cut you in on some deals that would make your head spin." "Chase, you do realize I've been successfully investing for over 15 years, right?" Sure, but this is different. This is insider stuff, real opportunities." I hung up without another word. "Vultures," Isabella said quietly. "What?" "They're all vultures. Monica wants gossip, Derek wants attention, Chase wants money, even my parents. They want to control the situation, manage the damage to their reputation." "And what do you want?" Isabella leaned against me, her head on my shoulder. "I want to go back to yesterday morning when you were just my husband, who made me coffee and kissed me goodbye and worried about normal things like whether we needed to buy groceries." "I can still be that person." "Can you?" "Because I have a feeling our quiet little life just got very, very complicated." She was right again. The phone kept ringing all morning. Friends, acquaintances, even Isabella's cousin from Seattle who she hadn't spoken to in 2 years. Word was spreading fast, and with each call, the story grew a little more dramatic. By noon, according to the rumor mill, I was everything from a tech mogul to a crypto billionaire to a secret heir to some European fortune. The truth, that I'd built my wealth through careful investments and strategic anonymity, was apparently too boring for the gossip circuit. "We should go out," I said finally, after the 20th call of the day. "Are you insane? Everyone will be staring." "Let them stare. I'm not hiding anymore." The Riverside Grill was packed for lunch, which was exactly what I'd expected. Word travels fast in our social circle, and I knew half the people there had heard some version of yesterday's revelation. The hostess, a college student named Jenny, who'd seated us dozens of times before, did a double take when she saw us. "Mr. and Mrs. Mason, right this way." Her tone was different, more deferential, more eager to please. Isabella noticed it too, squeezing my hand as we followed Jenny to our usual table by the window. "This is what I was talking about," she murmured. We'd barely sat down when I spotted them across the restaurant. Chase Langford, holding court at a large table with several people from Isabella's agency. He was gesturing animatedly, clearly telling some story that had his audience captivated. When he saw us, his face lit up with that predatory smile I'd come to despise. "Incoming," I warned Isabella. Chase excused himself from his table and strutted over, his expensive suit and flashy watch on full display. Behind him trailed Derek Chen, looking nervous but curious. "Alex, the man of the hour!" Chase's voice was loud enough to turn heads at nearby tables. "Mind if we join you?" "Actually, we do," Isabella said coolly. "Come on, Izzy. Don't be like that. We're all friends here." Chase pulled out a chair without waiting for permission. "I was just telling everyone about our conversation this morning, about those investment opportunities." Derek hovered uncertainly, clearly wanting to sit but sensing the tension. "What opportunities would those be?" I asked. "Well, since you're obviously a sophisticated investor, I thought you might be interested in some private placements I'm putting together. High-risk, high-reward stuff." "Such as?" Chase leaned forward conspiratorially. "There's a biotech company in Austin, pre-IPO, working on revolutionary cancer treatments. I can get you in on the ground floor for just $10 million. I almost laughed. "Just $10 million? For someone with your resources, it's pocket change, and the potential returns are astronomical." "How do you know what my resources are?" Chase's smile faltered slightly. "Well, I mean, obviously you're doing well for yourself." "Obviously." I took a sip of water. "Tell me about this biotech company. What's their burn rate? How many competitors are in their space? What's their IP portfolio look like?" Well, I'd have to get back to you on the specifics." "You're asking me to invest $10 million in a company you know nothing about?" The smile was completely gone now. "I know they're going to be huge. My contact in Austin says, 'Your contact.'" I set down my water glass. "Chase, do you have any idea how many revolutionary cancer treatment companies I've seen come and go? How many brilliant biotech investments have turned into expensive lessons?" Derek finally spoke up. "Maybe we should let them eat in peace." "No, this is good," Chase said, his voice getting sharper. "This is exactly the kind of discussion we need to be having. Alex, you've obviously done well with some lucky picks, but this is different. This is professional-level investing." Isabella's hand tightened on mine. I could feel her anger radiating across the table. "Lucky picks?" I repeated. "Come on, man. We both know the market's been on a bull run for years. Rising tide lifts all boats, right?" The restaurant had grown quieter around us. People were definitely listening now. "You think my success is just luck?" "I think you've had some good timing. But real wealth building, the kind of generational wealth we're talking about, that takes expertise, that takes connections." "Like your connections?" "Exactly. I've got relationships with fund managers, private equity guys, investment banks, people who can open doors you didn't even know existed." I stood up slowly. The entire restaurant was watching now, conversations dying as people turned to stare. "Chase, I want you to listen very carefully. I've been building wealth since before you graduated college. I've made investments that have returned thousands of %. I've built a portfolio worth more than most countries' GDP. And I did it all without your connections, your fund managers, or your $10 million cancer cures." Chase's face was red now. "That's impossible. Nobody builds that kind of wealth without what? Without being part of your little boys' club? Without the right last name or the right connections? Without professional guidance. I am the professional guidance." I pulled out my phone and opened my trading app. "Here's my portfolio, Chase. Take a good look." Chase squinted at the screen, his expression changing as he processed the numbers. Derek leaned over his shoulder, his eyes widening. That can't be right," Chase whispered. $10.2 billion, I said loudly enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Built from $20,000 and 15 years of actual expertise." The restaurant was dead silent now. Chase was staring at the phone like it might explode. But you're just an accountant." "I'm a lot of things, but mostly, I'm the guy who just turned down your $10 million opportunity because I could buy your entire biotech company with the interest I earn in a week. Derek had gone pale. Mr. Mason, I'm so sorry. We didn't mean to. You didn't mean to what? Assume I was some amateur who needed your help? Assume I got lucky instead of working my ass off to understand markets better than most professionals? Chase was still staring at my phone. This has to be fake. Nobody has this kind of money. You know what's really funny? I took my phone back. I could have been polite. I could have listened to your pitch and said, thanks but no thanks, and let you save face. But you couldn't resist talking down to me. You had to make it about luck and professional guidance and connections. Alex, Isabella said quietly, maybe we should… No. I looked around the restaurant, at all the faces staring at us. I think everyone should hear this. Chase here thinks I need his help to invest my money properly. He thinks my success is just luck. He thinks I don't understand how real wealth building works. Chase stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. I don't care what your phone says. You don't care about facts? That's probably why you're still hustling $10 million schemes instead of building real wealth. Screw you, Alex. You think having money makes you better than everyone else? No, Chase. I think understanding money makes me better at investing than you are. There's a difference. Chase's hands were shaking with rage. You're still just some nobody accountant who got lucky with a few stock picks. Actually, a voice said from across the restaurant, he's the anonymous investor who owns controlling interest in Harrington Industries. We all turned to see Monica Westfield standing by her table, her phone in her hand. She'd obviously been live tweeting the entire confrontation. He's what? Derek's voice cracked. 43% ownership, Monica continued, clearly enjoying being the center of attention, which makes him one of the most powerful people in the city. Chase looked like he'd been hit by a truck. That's impossible. Is it? I asked. Is it impossible that someone could build wealth without your connections? Is it impossible that someone you looked down on could actually know more than you do? The silence stretched until Derek finally spoke. We should go. Yeah, Chase said weakly. We should definitely go. As they walked away, I could hear whispers starting up around the restaurant. Isabella was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Feel better? She asked. Actually, yes, I do. Good, because I think our quiet little life just officially ended. She was right. My phone was already buzzing with notifications, texts, calls, social media mentions. Monica's live tweeting had apparently reached a much wider audience than just the restaurant. But for the first time in years, I didn't care who knew. I was tired of hiding, tired of being underestimated, tired of people like Chase assuming they knew better. No more secrets, I said. No more secrets, Isabella agreed. But Alex? Yeah? Next time someone offers you a $10 million investment opportunity, maybe just say no thanks instead of destroying them in public? I grinned. Where's the fun in that? By evening, the video had gone viral. Monica's live tweeting had been picked up by local news, then business blogs, then financial Twitter. Anonymous investor was trending, along with restaurant takedown and billionaire reveal. Isabella and I were watching the coverage from our couch, a bottle of wine between us and our phones buzzing constantly with calls we weren't answering. Channel 7 is calling you the mystery mogul, Isabella read from her tablet. And apparently someone found your old college photos. How did they find college photos? Monica's been very thorough in her follow-up posts. She's basically appointed herself your unofficial biographer. On screen, a financial analyst was speculating about my investment strategy. The anonymous Harrington Industries investor has been one of the most successful activist shareholders of the past decade. If this is indeed the same person, we're looking at someone with an almost supernatural ability to identify undervalued assets. Supernatural, I snorted. It's called reading financial statements. My phone rang, and this time the caller ID made me pause. It was Tom Bradley, my old roommate from college, and one of the few people who knew about my early investment successes. I have to take this, I told Isabella. Alex, you magnificent bastard. Tom's voice boomed through the speaker. I just saw the video. Sarah and I are dying laughing. It wasn't supposed to be entertainment. Are you kidding? Watching you destroy that pompous asshole was the best thing I've seen all year. Sarah made me replay it 3 times. Tom and Sarah lived in Chicago now, where he worked as an engineer and she ran a nonprofit. They were among the few people in my life who'd known me before the money, who remembered when I was eating ramen noodles and sleeping on a futon. How's Sarah handling the news that her friend is secretly a billionaire? I asked. She says it explains why you always picked up the check when we visited. Also why you never seemed stressed about money even when you were supposedly living paycheck to paycheck. Isabella was watching me with a smile. She'd met Tom and Sarah several times and liked them both. Put me on speaker, Tom said. I want to talk to Isabella too. I switched to speakerphone. You're on. Isabella, girl, how are you handling all this craziness? I'm still processing, she admitted. It's been a very surreal few days. I bet. But I have to ask, did you really have no idea? None. I mean, Alex was always smart about money, and he gave great investment advice, but I thought he was just naturally good with finances. He was giving you investment advice? Tom laughed. Isabella, this man made me a millionaire just by telling me which stocks to buy. His naturally good with finances is like saying Einstein was naturally good with math. You're a millionaire? Isabella looked at me with raised eyebrows. Tom's very good at following directions, I said. I'm very good at recognizing genius when I see it, Tom corrected. Alex, remember when you told me to buy Amazon at $18 a share? That was a long time ago. I bought 10,000 shares. Do you know what those are worth now? Isabella was doing math in her head. Oh my God! $34 million, Tom said cheerfully. Give or take, best advice I ever got. Why didn't you tell me about this? Isabella asked me. Because Tom's success doesn't change who we are. Money is just a tool. A very nice tool, Tom added. But Alex is right. The guy I roomed with in college, who stayed up all night reading annual reports and taught himself derivatives trading, that's the same guy you married. The money just proves what I already knew about him. After we hung up, Isabella was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, How many people have you helped like that? Like what? Made rich. Given life-changing advice to. I thought about it. I don't know. I don't keep track. But there are others? Some. When I see good people making bad financial decisions, sometimes I say something. Like when you told Monica to sell her Enron stock. That was just common sense. Alex, you saved her $200,000. That's not common sense. That's expertise. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the video. Impressive takedown. We should meet. Patricia Thornton. I showed Isabella the message. Patricia Thornton was exactly the kind of person Monica had mentioned earlier. Old money, country club royalty, the type who looked down on anyone who hadn't inherited their wealth. She wants to meet you, Isabella said. The woman who spent 5 years acting like we don't exist at social events. People's attitudes change quickly when they think you can do something for them. Are you going to meet with her? Probably not, but I might string her along for a while, just for fun. Isabella laughed. You're enjoying this more than you're admitting. Maybe a little. The doorbell rang, and we both froze. It was almost 9 p.m., and we weren't expecting anyone. Reporters? Isabella asked. I looked through the peephole and sighed. Worse, your parents. Robert and Catherine stood on our doorstep, looking like they'd aged 5 years in the past 24 hours. Robert was holding a bottle of what looked like very expensive champagne. Should I let them in? I asked. It's your house. Well, apparently it's your house that you could afford to buy 1,000 times over, but you know what I mean. I opened the door. Robert, Catherine, this is unexpected. We brought champagne, Catherine said weakly, holding up the bottle. To celebrate. Celebrate what? Your success? Robert looked uncertain. We wanted to apologize properly, in person. I stepped aside to let them in. They looked around our modest living room like they were seeing it for the first time, which, in a way, they were. Yesterday, it had been the home of their daughter's struggling husband. Tonight, it was the carefully maintained disguise of a billionaire. We've been watching the news, Catherine said, settling carefully on our couch. The coverage has been quite extensive. Quite positive, too, Robert added quickly. Very impressive. The way you handled that young man at the restaurant. You mean the way I humiliated him? The way you defended yourself, Catherine corrected. He was being very presumptuous. Isabella sat beside me, her hand finding mine. Mom, Dad, what do you really want? Robert and Catherine exchanged glances. Finally, Robert spoke. We want to make amends. We misjudged you terribly, Alex, and we're ashamed of our behavior. You offered me $5 million to divorce your daughter. We were trying to protect her, Catherine said. We thought you might be taking advantage of her financially. Instead, I was the one being taken advantage of, I said dryly. What do you mean? Robert looked confused. I mean, Isabella's been married to a billionaire for 5 years and living in a one-bedroom apartment. If anyone's been shortchanged in this relationship, it's her. Isabella squeezed my hand. I've never felt shortchanged. We'd like to start over, Robert said. If you'll let us. We'd like to get to know the real you. The real me is the same person you met last night. The only thing that's changed is your perception. That's not entirely fair, Catherine said. You were deliberately deceiving us about your circumstances. I was living my life the way I chose to live it. You were the ones making assumptions. The room fell silent. Finally, Isabella spoke up. What are you really here for? Because this doesn't feel like just an apology. Robert looked uncomfortable. Well, there is the matter of the company. Ah, I leaned back. Now, we're getting to it. You own 43% of Harrington Industries. That makes you the largest single shareholder. The board is concerned about your intentions. What intentions would those be? Your plans for the company, whether you intend to make changes to management or strategic direction. I pretended to consider this. You know, Robert, that's a very good question. What would you do if you owned 43% of a company whose leadership had just tried to bribe you? Robert went pale. Alex, please, I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But the company employs 12,000 people. Their livelihoods depend on what? On you staying in charge? On everything remaining exactly the same? On stability. On experienced leadership. Experienced leadership. I tasted the words. Like the experienced leadership that nearly bankrupted the company 3 years ago? The experienced leadership that I've been quietly advising ever since? Robert's mouth fell open. You've been… What? Every major strategic decision you've made in the past 3 years came from anonymous recommendations I sent to the board. The acquisition of mid-tech industries, the divestiture of the European division, the pivot to renewable energy contracts. All me. Catherine was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. That's impossible. Is it? Your husband just told me how important experienced leadership is. Well, I've been providing that leadership, anonymously, while you thought I was just some accountant who wasn't good enough for your daughter. Robert was silent for a long moment. Finally, he asked, What do you want? Right now? I want you to leave. I want to finish this bottle of wine with my wife and think about whether I feel like being merciful to people who tried to buy me off. Alex, Catherine started, Please. Good night, Catherine. Robert, thanks for the champagne. After they left, Isabella and I sat in silence for several minutes. That was brutal, she finally said. They deserved it. I know, but they're still my parents. And they still tried to pay me to leave you. Some things don't just get forgiven because you say sorry. Isabella nodded slowly. So what are you going to do? About the company? I smiled. I have a few ideas. The Harrington Industries board meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 10 a.m. I arrived at 9:30, wearing the same modest suit I'd worn to dinner with Robert and Catherine. The security guard in the lobby did a double-take when I asked for directions to the executive conference room. Are you sure you're in the right place, sir? Very sure. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor gave me time to think about what I was about to do. For 3 years, I'd been the invisible hand guiding this company back to profitability. Today, I was going to become very visible. The conference room was exactly what I'd expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a massive mahogany table, leather chairs that probably cost more than most people's cars. The board members were already seated, 12 men and women in expensive suits, all looking nervous. Robert sat at the head of the table, his face pale but determined. When I walked in, the conversation stopped dead. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert said, his voice carefully controlled, I'd like you to meet Alex Mercer, Isabella's husband and our largest shareholder. The introductions were awkward. These people had heard about me, but seeing me in person, young, modestly dressed, clearly not from their world, was obviously unsettling. Mr. Mason, said Patricia Hendricks, the board's lead independent director, we appreciate you taking the time to meet with us. My pleasure. We understand you have some concerns about the company's direction. I took the seat Robert indicated, directly across from him at the far end of the table. Actually, I'm quite pleased with the company's direction. Revenue is up 40% over 3 years, profit margins have improved dramatically, and the stock price has nearly tripled. Then, what's the problem? Asked James Morrison, the CFO. The problem is that none of you know why any of that happened. Uncomfortable glances were exchanged around the table. I'm not sure I understand, Patricia said. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. 3 years ago, this company was hemorrhaging money, bad acquisitions, poor strategic planning, a complete failure to anticipate market trends. You were 6 months away from bankruptcy. That's an exaggeration, Robert said quickly. Is it? I slid a financial analysis across the table. Your own internal projections showed negative cash flow through the end of that fiscal year. Your credit lines were maxed out. Your biggest clients were jumping ship. The board members were studying the documents, their faces growing increasingly pale. Then, I continued, you started receiving anonymous strategic recommendations, detailed analyses of market opportunities, suggestions for divestitures and acquisitions, warnings about industry trends, and you started following those recommendations. We receive input from many sources, Robert said defensively. Do you? I pulled out my laptop and opened an email account. Let me read you something. The European division is a drain on resources with no clear path to profitability. Recommend immediate divestiture to focus on core North American operations. Robert's face went white. That email was sent to this board 3 years ago. 6 months later, you divested the European division for $200 million, money that kept you afloat while you restructured. How do you have access to board communications? Patricia demanded. Because I sent them. I turned the laptop around so they could see the email account. Every strategic recommendation, every market analysis, every warning about competitive threats, all from me. The silence was deafening. That's impossible, James whispered. Is it? Let me give you another example. I pulled up another email. Midtech Industries is undervalued due to temporary supply chain issues. Their core technology platform is worth at least $800 million. Recommend acquisition before market correction. You sent that? Robert's voice was barely audible. I sent that. You bought Midtech for $400 million. It's now worth $1.2 billion and accounts for 30% of your revenue. Patricia was staring at me like I was an alien. You've been managing our strategy for 3 years? I've been saving your company for 3 years, while your CEO tried to bribe me to divorce his daughter because he thought I wasn't successful enough. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Robert, Patricia said slowly, is that true? Robert couldn't meet her eyes. There was a misunderstanding. He offered me $5 million to leave Isabella, I said clearly. He told me she deserved someone from her own class, someone who could provide for her properly. Jesus Christ, Robert, muttered David Chen, the board's longest-serving member. I was protecting my daughter. You were protecting your ego, I shot back. You couldn't stand the idea that she'd married beneath her station, even though the man she married was single-handedly keeping your company afloat. Patricia cleared her throat. Mr. Mason, what are your intentions regarding the company? I leaned back in my chair. That's an excellent question. What would you do if you owned 43% of a company whose leadership had insulted you, tried to bribe you, and taken credit for your work? Please, Robert said quietly. The company is doing well now. The employees, the shareholders. The shareholders are doing well because of me. The employees have jobs because of me. And you want to talk about protecting them? What do you want? Patricia asked. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. I want Robert to resign as CEO, effective immediately. The room erupted in protests, but I held up my hand. I want a new management structure that actually understands the strategic decisions they're making instead of just following anonymous advice. I want a board that can think independently instead of rubber-stamping recommendations they don't understand. You can't just, Robert started. I can do whatever I want. I own 43% of this company. I've been running it from the shadows for 3 years. The only difference now is that everyone knows it. Patricia was frantically taking notes. Who would you recommend as interim CEO? Sarah Mitchell. I named the company's current COO, a brilliant woman who'd been consistently passed over for promotion. She actually understands the business. She's been implementing my recommendations for 2 years, and she's the only executive who ever questioned whether they made sense instead of just following orders. Sarah's not ready for, Robert began. Sarah's more ready than you were when you inherited the job from your father, I cut him off. At least she's earned it. The meeting continued for another hour, but the outcome was never in doubt. When you own 43% of a company and can prove you've been responsible for its success, you get what you want. Robert resigned that afternoon. Sarah Mitchell was named interim CEO, pending a board vote, and I finally stepped out of the shadows as the anonymous investor who'd been pulling the strings all along. The press conference was scheduled for Friday morning. Isabella stood beside me as I faced a room full of reporters and cameras, finally ready to tell the whole story. 3 years ago, I began, I saw an opportunity to invest in an undervalued company with strong fundamentals but poor leadership. Today, that investment has returned over 300%, and the company employs more people than ever before. Mr. Mason, called out a reporter from the Business Journal, why did you choose to remain anonymous for so long? Because I wanted to prove that good ideas succeed on their own merit, regardless of who suggests them. If this board had known the recommendations were coming from someone they considered beneath their notice, they might not have listened. Are you planning to take a more active role in management going forward? I looked at Isabella, who nodded encouragingly. I'm planning to ensure that Harrington Industries continues to make smart, strategic decisions. Whether that requires my active involvement remains to be seen. After the press conference, Isabella and I walked out of the building together. The modest life we'd built was officially over, but something better was beginning. Any regrets? She asked. About what? About giving up our quiet little existence. About everyone knowing who you really are now. I thought about it as we walked to our car, the same 10-year-old Honda I'd been driving for years, though I could afford to buy the entire dealership. No regrets, I said finally, but I think it might be time to buy a new car. Isabella laughed. Just one? Let's start with one and see how it goes. As we drove home, my phone was already buzzing with new opportunities, new requests, new people who suddenly wanted to be my friend. But none of that mattered as much as the woman sitting beside me, who'd loved me when she thought I was nobody special, and who loved me still now that everyone knew better. So what's next? She asked. Next, we figure out what to do with $10 billion and the rest of our lives. Any ideas? I smiled. A few. But first, I think we should take that trip to Europe you've been wanting. The real one, not the business trip that got canceled. Can we afford it? Isabella asked with mock concern. I think we can manage,